Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports Day Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pal David Moore. Evan Grant will not be with us this week. I guess this is our first podcast of the new year, isn't it, David?
I believe it is. Yeah, we took a bit of a break, a brief respite for 2 weeks.
You know, we're always working, even when we're taking time off, David. We're accumulating knowledge.
Time off from the podcast, but yes, our institutional knowledge grows by leaps and bounds.
Leaps and bounds, unbelievable! I tell you, just
of course when the starting point is so low as mine is, it's not hard to.
No, so my head's so bad. I bought a hat the other day, and the guy told me, "You must have a massive brain because that is one fat head." I took it as a compliment. I wasn't really sure what that meant, but anyway.
Yeah, but you can't have a big head and not a big brain, though. I have also seen evidence of that in this world.
We tell Bruce Bochy that all the time.
He does have a big noggin, doesn't he?
Oh my gosh, he's wearing size 8.
Golly.
I'm a 7 3/8 myself. My problem is my head is malformed. You know, when I got this hat, the guy said, I said, well, no, my problem is I can't wear hats for very long. They cut off the circulation and it hurts my head. And he goes, yeah, you've got kind of a funny shaped head. I said, well, thanks very much. I appreciate that.
Well, I guess a malformed head is at least better than a malformed personality. So,
well, no one says I didn't have that. So I'm not sure that probably doesn't apply too. It was a good holidays. I had a good time. I traveled around, did a lot of stuff. I would say the low point of my holiday experience was I took the lovely wife and we to the Peach Bowl where Texas pulled out that win against Arizona State. Yeah. And we stopped in the hotel bar one night to get a little drink before we went out to eat. And when the guy brought out our drinks, I could tell 10 feet from us, those glasses aren't clean. And then he set mine down in front of me and I picked it up and looked at it. And there was lipstick on it, and not even my color, you know. Which I just set the drink back down again, and just and politely paid and left at that point. So anyway, that was the low point of our experience. But if that's the low point, then that's pretty good, right? You're well.
You're at least there, sure.
At Texas Capital, we know that the path to greatness isn't for the faint of heart. It's full of chances and opportunities with no promises. We know because we help clients and communities achieve greatness every day. Texas Capital is a full-service financial services firm founded and headquartered in Dallas, Texas. Our customized solutions were built to keep your business moving forward. Please visit texascapital.com to learn more. That's texascapital.com. Texas Capital is the collective brand name for the Texas Capital Bank and its separate non-affiliate banks and wholly owned subsidiaries. For deposit products, member FDIC.
All right. Well, let's get into this whole thing now, David, because we've got a whole thing happening here. Of course, as always, we have a circus around the Cowboys, even when they're not playing. And Jerry Jones will probably draw out this thing with his head coach, Mike McCarthy. We know that the Chicago Bears have asked for permission to talk to him. That will not happen until Jerry makes a decision with Mike. So Lord knows how long that might take. How long did it take when Jason Garrett was still reporting to the office before Jerry finally said, that's enough?
When Jason was squatting in the office that he had for 9.5 years. But that was a little more unusual because they actually started interviewing other coaches and Jason was still in the building. But the release on that they were moving on from Jason Garrett actually took place on Sunday during the wild card round. So I would anticipate we would get a resolution a little bit quicker on this. That being said, Dallas has exclusive negotiating rights with Mike McCarthy until January the 14th, which is a week from today. So it could extend that long. But I really believe that Chicago putting in a request to speak to Mike McCarthy, and my belief is, there will probably be another team or two do the same. I think that will accelerate this process. And my understanding, what I was told going into, and we're taping this on Tuesday morning, the two men had not met on Monday. but that they had such a mutual respect for each other and enjoy working with each other so much that the club or McCarthy wouldn't respond to any request until Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones had a chance to sit down and talk. And I anticipate that'll happen in the next 24 to 48 hours.
So I don't know. I don't know if we've ever asked you this and tried to gauge it, but what would you say the odds of McCarthy will return, of him returning as a head coach? And has that changed over the course of the season in your mind?
Well, it's certainly changed from the aftermath of the loss to Detroit at home, where at that point I thought it was a fait accompli that Jerry Jones would move on. I also believe that Mike McCarthy and his coaching staff felt it was probably over at that point and the writing was on the wall. But the way this team responded from that point, while continuing to lose key players and shuffling lineups every week, and I think it showed that the culture is in place. They're still listening to this guy. There are some positives that came out of one of the worst seasons. This was only the fourth losing season in the last 20 years. I know Cowboys fans think it's worse than that because of the lack of playoff success, but this was only the fourth losing season in 20 years. And that's a pretty good stretch of at least regular season accomplishment. So look, this is from, no one has said this to me directly, but from the people I've talked to in the last few weeks and months, trying to keep up with this and get a feel for where it would go. My belief is that when they get together to talk, it will naturally evolve into a discussion about Mike McCarthy coming back. And then at that point, what we don't know is, can Jerry Jones wrap his head around paying the going rate for what a head coach with Mike McCarthy's credentials commands in today's market? Or will these two part because Jerry just doesn't want to pay that money to a coach and he'll go in a different direction? So I think they will talk about coming back. But I think length of contract and size is obviously a big hurdle. And what are the conditions on coming back? What are the staff changes? What are the offseason approach the team takes? And, I think there are a lot of things for the two men to work through and discuss. But I do think they will get to the point of discussing coming back. And then when you get into the details, we'll see where it goes from there.
Let's just kind of look at some of those numbers. I've seen a report that we assume he's making around $8 million, and that some of these coaches that are getting jobs now are making, like Ben Johnson might get $18 million to be a head coach.
Well, and Mike McCarthy retained Don Yee, who he didn't have when he signed the first contract. Don Yee represents two head coaches, Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh. And you look at their contracts, I believe they're around $17 million and $18 million. So now Mike McCarthy is not the sort to say, look, I need one more dollar than Sean Payton because of what, and I do think he's willing to build in incentives to a point, but also you don't want to be paid half of contemporary who you have accomplished as much or more than. So, and if you don't get that commitment from an owner, not just Jerry Jones, any owner, why put yourself in that position? So Mike McCarthy's been around long enough to know what he wants and what he's comfortable doing and what a lack of commitment would mean, and then moving on. And from talking to people, I think Mike McCarthy wants to come back. He would prefer to come back. But he is open to the possibility that they can't make a deal work. And if that's the case, I think he's happy and content moving on as well. That's not his preference, but I do believe that he would be open to that and really wouldn't be too bothered by it.
I have to say, I've kind of come around on this. I think the issue for me, or at least it should be for Jerry Jones, is that if he brings Mike McCarthy back, and if the team stumbles coming out of the gate next year, well, then the crescendo from fans will just be crushing, at
Yeah.
that point. And then you have carried this, weight into the new season, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like you've built this thing up so big now that fans are wanting to see him go. And then if you kind of ignore all that, what the Mars did with the Giants, that Brian Daboll gets the job to come back is just phenomenal to me. If you look at that situation, you say, well, my God, why wouldn't you bring Mike McCarthy back? He's twice the coach that he is and done twice as much as what he has done. And how does he keep his job? So it is an interesting conundrum here. To me, is the problem is if they do stumble coming out of the gate next year, then you have probably really rejected the fan base at that point, and who knows how they react to that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think there's several other things here. Look, if Jerry goes to his default mode and conducts business as he has, as we've seen him do it in the past with coaches, I believe Mike McCarthy's gone, because what does Jerry Jones do when he feels that the fan base is at the end of its rope from a frustration standpoint? To sell hope and excitement, you've got to get a new voice in there. You've got to get a new face. But I think the other side of that, more so than any year that I remember covering, I think the fan base has honed in on the fact of, well, wait, if the Jones family doesn't change how it conducts business, bringing in a new head coach is not going to do anything. This team's had some pretty good head coaches, and you haven't broken that, divisional round ceiling that's been sitting over this franchise for 29 years. So I think it's interesting, because I think if you view it strictly as a referendum on Mike McCarthy and the job he's done, I think Jerry would move on and look, I'll get another guy in here. I can get everybody excited about a new beginning. We'll go from there. But if Jerry acknowledges that the failure this season was a referendum on what him and Stephen Jones did as far as building the roster, I think he's more likely to keep Mike McCarthy and maybe tweak a few minor tweaks in the offseason approach. But even then, I don't think you're going to see a much different offseason than what we saw last year, which really frustrated fans.
So let's say this. Let's say he brings back Mike McCarthy. What are the chances he's still running the offense?
Well, I think that would be one thing they would discuss, right? And I think Mike McCarthy would feel that this team's at its best when I'm running the offense. Being perfectly aware, I think there's a lot of rationale to explain why this offense took such a severe drop this year. Starting two rookie offensive linemen who played different positions in the NFL than they did in college. Not having really any receiver behind. The best receiver behind CD Lamb goes out early in the season with a knee injury. And the tight end, Jake Ferguson, did not build on what he had put in place the first 2 years. Early concussion, then got beat up, and you didn't see him. This was his worst season, I thought, in his 3 years in the league. And, they went down. And again, this goes back to the offseason, refusing to address the running back position and bringing back Ezekiel Elliott, which was a colossal flop in misjudgment and team building. All of that, I think, explains why this offense took such a major drop. But you look at the other 4 years under McCarthy, this offense was in the top of the league, and his principles. I know there's a debate on timing offense versus West Coast offense and how he has the receivers run their routes, and people who are brought up in one discipline obviously like their system better than the other. But I think over the course of his career, Mike McCarthy's teams offensively have always been near the top of the league, unless you have extenuating circumstances like your quarterback going down in week 9 and other key injuries as you had on this team this year.
To me, the thing that I would like to see the Cowboys do, because it seemed like that's what the better teams in the league did this year, was to lean more into the running game. As the course of the season came along, they obviously got better at it. and Rico Dowdle ended up being a 1,000-yard rusher. And I think through the first 6 or 7 games, if you'd have said Rico Dowdle would end up with 1,000 yards rushing, you'd said you're nuts. There's no way that's going to happen.
No, I remember. Didn't we have a conversation on this podcast setting the over/under on the leading rusher at like 650?
Yeah.
Or something like that. I mean, he finished very strong. Rushed for over 104 or 5 games in one stretch. I think he was like the 5th or 6th leading rusher in the league since he was really installed as the starter in that Atlanta game back in week 11 or whenever it was, so over the final 9 games. So a pretty good sample size. All of that being said, I don't know that you want to go into next season with Rico Dowdle as your bell cow running back. I think he's an outstanding guy to have in a 1-2 punch, kind of a 1B, if you will. But they still need to address the running back position. But with what Dowdle did and what this young offensive line started to do, kind of coming together late, especially in run blocking, I think gives them some encouragement going forward.
Well, speaking of that, David, let's look at that a little bit here because of what the things that you kind of alluded to a little while ago when you talked about plugging in 2 offensive linemen at places they've not played before. Of course, you're talking about Tyler Guyton, who was a right tackle at Oklahoma and drafted to play left tackle for the Cowboys, and Cooper Beebe, who was a guard at Kansas State and is now a center for the Cowboys. Beebe fared better than that in that situation than Guyton did. Guyton didn't even play in the last game except on special teams. He was the new Phil Pozderac. I think how many penalties he ended up with? Something like 14 penalties this year, or 11 to 14 penalties, somewhere in there. A lot of problems in that situation. I think the way I look at this is that they got a little arrogant in their drafting process and in their roster building, and thinking that they had been so good at drafting offensive linemen. They certainly were in the first part of the last decade when they drafted, starting in 2014, or actually starting in 2011 with Tyron Smith in the first round.
That was Jason Garrett's first draft. Yeah, starting with him. Yeah.
So it's Tyron Smith, the Hall of Famer, and then in 2013, Travis Frederick. He might be a Hall of Famer if not for the injury that knocked him into his career. Zach Martin, 2014, a Hall of Famer. So when you do that kind of thing, you start to feel like you're a little bit bulletproof in drafting offensive linemen. And then they got into this, the later part of the last decade when it didn't work out quite as well with some of the offensive linemen. Drafted Connor Williams in 2018. He ended up playing pretty well for the Dolphins as a center. Has moved around a little bit, but Connor McGovern didn't work out in 2019. Now, he was a 3rd-round draft pick, and that's a little different when you're starting to reach down there at that point. But I think that if we're looking at these, and of course, Tyler Smith was a great pick. He was a 1st-round pick in 2022. He was a Pro Bowler this year.
I think that's where Tyler Guyton may have. Yeah, I think that's where they may have gotten a little over their skis with Tyler Guyton, because really the profile on Tyler Smith and Tyler Guyton was pretty similar going into the draft. They weren't on that first plateau of linemen. They were kind of at the top of that second plateau, who were considered raw, would need a little work, but would be a good starter in the league, but would probably need a little work. Maybe not someone you should count on to plug in and play immediately from day one. Tyler Smith blew that out of and both had the same thing. They were raw, and they had too many penalties in college.
Right, right.
Tyler Smith was able to play through that. Not only that, he did it at 2 positions. I mean, they trained him at left guard all year. Tyron Smith went down just before the opener, and they swing him outside, and he's really outstanding for a rookie. And I think they felt that, we see the same raw physical skills in Tyler Guyton that we saw in Tyler Smith. We hear and see a lot of the same questions with Tyler Guyton that was about Tyler Smith. It worked with Tyler Smith immediately. We'll make it work with Tyler Guyton immediately too. And it did not. In fact, now he had some nagging injuries, but as the season went along, he actually played less later in the season, because I think they wanted him to step back and kind of, sometimes if you get into a bad pattern early, it's better to step back than continually repeating your mistakes as you're trying to compete. And so his time actually went down later because I think they felt that he just wasn't ready for the role that they had envisioned for him. So, I think that's a case of where their drafting prowess maybe had them misread how likely it was that Tyler Guyton could do the exact same thing that Tyler Smith did. So I think that hurt him there. BB, I think's played pretty well. I do think just physically and what he brings is that he'll actually be an upgrade over time from what Tyler Biotish was at center for them, who was a Pro Bowl center who went on to Washington. But first year in the league as a center after playing guard his entire career in college, naturally a learning curve there as well.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Now, if we look at these last two drafts too, David, and like I said, Will Clay's did an outstanding job overall as the guy that's been in charge of the Cowboys draft since he took that over. In the late 90s and the early 2000s, if you want to understand why the Cowboys were so bad, you simply just have to look at those drafts. They were terrible. Since he has come aboard, they have had some outstanding drafts. They've also drafted some Hall of Fame players, as we just said, some of those offensive linemen. And certainly if you look at, taking Micah Parsons in the first round in 2021 and what he's been able to do there, they've had some players that they've also hit on at the back end of these drafts. If you look at 2022, besides getting Tyler Smith and Sam Williams, who looks like a very good player, they did get Jake Ferguson in the fourth round. Now he did take a step back this year, and that's a cause of concern because he was very good.
He did. Yes.
Deron Bland in the fifth round, that was a terrific pick there. So they've had drafts like that. But in 23 and 24, we really haven't seen that so far. It's still early, obviously, but that 2023 draft, of course, with Mozzie Smith in the first round and Luke Schoonmaker in the second, that's, Mozzie Smith's just a guy. Luke Schoonmaker, just a guy. DeMarvion Overshown in the third round was a great pick. He has played far better for the Cowboys than I saw him play at Texas. I watched a lot of Texas games, and he was a good player. He did not. I did not see that kind of speed play in college that he has shown at the pro level. And of course, he just had two terrible injuries that are going to cost him 2 entire seasons.
So he's basically, and again, as good as pick as he's been, will play 10 games in his first at least 2.5 seasons. There's a chance he returns in the second half of next year, but we'll have to see about that. And that was an injury to the same leg, which is also troubling
very
as well.
Concerning, absolutely.
But
so if you look at that,
your draft developed team, you can't take 2 years off as far as contributions from your draft class, and that's really where they've been, or at least spotty production. And Micah Parsons, I think, got better this year, but to the level of the impact you would expect a first-round pick, no. You still don't know how Luke Schoonmaker fits into this scheme offensively and what he can give them. And now you're going to be in year 3. So, these last 2 drafts to this stage have not produced like their previous drafts did, which is part of the reason they find themselves at 7 and 10.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why they really have to hit on this draft. And, of course, they're going to be drafting higher as well, right?
That helps. And that makes a big difference, especially in rounds 3, 4, 5. That's where it really makes a difference in there. And Dallas is going to pick up an additional 4 compensatory picks in round 4 or 5. So that's they're going to have some more draft capital to play with, and they'll have more. They should hit more in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, and those additional picks give them the ability to move up in a 3rd round if there's a player there they really want to go get.
Well, that's no question. What you want to be getting is in those top 100 players, and
yes.
If you look at the in the last few drafts in 2024, their first pick was the 29th. It was the year before, it was the 26th. The year before that, the 24th. Then you go back to 2021 when they took Micah Parsons. He was the 12th pick. I'm not saying they're going to get another Micah Parsons with the 12th pick. No one's going to get that at 12 this year. But there will be a lot of interesting players available at that time. And I'm just wondering, David, we have talked about the running game and what they've done there. We've talked about, the fact that that they have done better there than they would expect. Rico Dowdle has been better, but they do need someone else there. But there's also a lot of running backs in this draft. There's a feeling out there that there might be a couple of dozen who could play and contribute, and maybe 10 or more who could start in the NFL. I've made my case for Cam Scadaboo in the third round. He nearly brought the Peach Bowl down around the Texas ears in that game.
Sure
I don't know
did.
if his game translates to the NFL, but I just like him. He plays with an edge. I think the Cowboys could use a player like that who has that. I think the fans, if he were to play anything remotely approaching what he does in college, the fans in this market would love him. They love Deuce Vaughn, and there's no reason to love him.
Yeah.
So I think that there are some possibilities out there at that position. I'm wondering, David, if you think in the first round at 12, because it always depends on how people draft quarterbacks, and that drops the talent level down, because the quarterbacks are never rated as highly as the players, position players otherwise.
Yeah.
But teams gamble on quarterbacks because sometimes you feel like you have to. So you jump up and take them. At 12, it could be a very interesting situation as to what develops. They might get one of the top two wide receivers. They could get one of the top of the couple defensive tackles, maybe an offensive lineman. Let's say a Kelvin Banks from Texas, the left tackle who won all the big awards in college football this year, a really great pass blocker, was available. Could you see them reaching? I'm not saying reaching. That's a bad word to use here. Could you see them going for another offensive tackle in the first round?
Yeah, I would, because then, one, it depends on what your coaching staff's going to be, right? And Tyler Guyton, you could move him back to right guard. You could, I think they needed. I haven't had a chance to sit through and sift all the options and how it matches up with the strength of the draft board yet. But this team needs a playmaker offensively, which I would say a receiver. It needs another running back, and it needs another offensive lineman on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, I think it needs a defensive tackle, and it needs a corner. So I think those 5 spots, you look at the best. And very quickly on the running back question, because Genty's the guy you're going to talk about that's worthy of a first-round pick and will be the first to go. And what you said, a very deep running back class, which there has not been a deep running back class in a while. But I was shocked last year when the Cowboys on their second pick in the third round did not use it on a running back, because they knew where they were in the fourth, the run was going to hit before it got to them, and it did. But because they didn't, I don't see any way they cannot take a running back in this draft class, especially with what you've seen on where the league has gone. So, but do you do it in the first round, or do you say, no, it's deep enough there, and Dowdle played well enough that, look, let's use this on one of the other, what you would call a premium position. So I think Dallas would probably lean in that direction rather than running back at the moment.
Yeah, I think the one issue with all that is if Jerry Jones thinks that Ashton Genty is going to be the next LaDainian Tomlinson, which that's the usual comp you get with him.
That's what they thought with Ezekiel Elliott, right? And Ezekiel Elliott had a tremendous impact his first couple of years in the league. I mean, he really helped transform that team. And that's the other side of the argument. If you get the right running back, you're suddenly not talking. You balance an offense, and what does Dak do best? Play action pass. That's certainly back in there. So you're playing to Dak's strengths by getting him a running back of that level. So you can make a strong argument for it. And those are the conversations that are going to be taking place at the Star in the coming weeks and months. Whoever is in there to discuss those things.
Yes, that's the question. Who's going to be talking about it? All right. That's going to do it for our Cowboys segment of the podcast. We'll be talking about the draft and what the Cowboys should do a lot over the next few months. There's always plenty of time to talk about all that, but we just dipped our toe in there a little.
At Texas Capital, we know that the path to greatness isn't for the faint of heart. It's full of chances and opportunities with no promises. We know because we help clients and communities achieve greatness every day. Texas Capital is a full-service financial services firm founded and headquartered in Dallas, Texas. Our customized solutions were built to keep your business moving forward. Please visit texascapital.com to learn more. That's texascapital.com. Texas Capital is the collective brand name for the Texas Capital Bank and its separate non-affiliate banks and wholly owned subsidiaries. For deposit products, member FDIC.
We're going to talk now about, have a little potpourri here in this segment. We're going to talk about the CFP. The Cotton Bowl is Friday night. You're going to see out at Jerry World, Texas and Ohio State.
Ohio State, a nice sheen of ice around the stadium to get there.
Yeah, and that's not a good visual. Is there a good memory? Does that remind you of a certain Super Bowl which Mike McCarthy won, as a matter of fact?
He did, yes.
That was a little bit of a mess. David, one of the things that kind of came up at the Peach Bowl was a story about how over the course of this season, you had the SEC title game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and then you had a quarterfinal game there, and now you're going to have the national championship game there on January the 20th. Now, Jerry World is involved in these things, right? So they're in the semifinals this year. They're in the rotation, but it has not been a place where the NFL has come back to for the Super Bowl. And I think had that situation not happened, with the Cowboys being unprepared for what happened out there and for those conditions at the Super Bowl when it was here, that certainly has had an impact on them getting another one, hasn't it?
Sure. And this area only has the infrastructure to prepare to a point for what is a generational weather event, which is what that was. That was a generational weather event. I mean, you still haven't seen a snowfall level to that amount in this area before or after the ice that was associated with everything. But there were other issues there too, right? There were the league was not even going to consider coming back here until all of the lawsuits were resolved over the seating capacity.
Right.
And that took 5 to 6 years to resolve. So Dallas will get it back. In the meantime, Dallas, I think Jerry Jones is assuaged somewhat by having 9 World Cup events in this stadium. It will host a Super Bowl again, but there have been a lot of other impressive stadiums have come online since then. And I think it will Dallas won't be part of any standing rotation. It will be the occasional, let's go back to Dallas. It hadn't been there in 15, 20 years. That's kind of the position they're in now.
Well, I think part of that, the factor for that too, is in the story about Mercedes-Benz Stadium was that they have mass transit out there.
Exactly,
so it's easy to get there,
and you can funnel and get in there. It's not easy to get to AT&T, and again, that was a massive event because you had Fort Worth officials, Arlington officials, Mid-City officials, Dallas officials. Took a lot of coordination to pull that Super Bowl off from a transportation standpoint. You just don't have that in Atlanta. And a lot of other cities.
Most cities, most great cities have great mass transit. The Dallas does not.
Nope.
Neither does Houston. It's a blight on the record of this state, in my estimation.
Yeah,
that we have not been able to work out mass transit, because long term that's just going to be an issue going forward, and we have a tendency to be very short sighted in this state about lots of things. All right, that's enough politicking. Let's look at this game here, David. Ohio State, I believe, at the last odds I saw, 5.5 point favorites. I think that's probably good. 5.5. I think that they could cover that if the Buckeyes continue to play like they have in these playoffs. They have really picked up. This was considered probably the most talented team in the nation going into this season. Lost to Oregon, a very close game, but lost, and so that dinged their record, obviously. And then they inexplicably lost to Michigan.
And the way they lost to that team, I think people were too down on them and who they were. But you've seen it in Texas OU through the years. There are years where in a rivalry that long standing with that bad blood, you get some just unfathomable results. And that was one for Ohio State, which I think a lot of people dismiss them because how good could they be if they lose to this Michigan team? But it's different in those long-standing rivalry games where a lot of those players are recruited by one school or the other, and there's just a lot of the motivation and the tradition of it just produces results that you normally don't get. but sometimes I think people read too much into it and don't take into account what that rivalry has produced through the years, you know?
Well, especially when you look at the fact that Michigan really underachieved this year. Now, they didn't have a
Yes.
quarterback, but they have 3 first-round draft picks on that defense, 2 in the defensive line. 2
Defense
of those,
outstanding. Yeah.
yeah, they have some. 2 of those picks are supposed to be top 10 picks. 2 of those players are supposed to be top 10 picks. So they have a really good defense, and that's the thing that made, to me, Texas win over Michigan in the up there in Ann Arbor. It's so impressive because they went up to, I believe, they scored 24 points in the first half, and at that point you knew the game was over because Michigan didn't have a quarterback. There's no way they could come back against Texas defense in the second half. But to score 24 points against a team with that kind of with those kind of defensive players and that kind of talent at the Big House was an impressive win. I got that win kind of lost.
It helped launch their season. Yeah, it launched
as the season went along. But then Michigan kind of rallied at the end and played a little better, and beat Alabama in the bowl game. So that win looks a little bit better for Texas. I will say this: what has to happen for Texas in this game is that they cannot afford to go out and play like they've played pretty much this whole second half of this season. Yeah. Where they have moments where they play really well, like they started out that game against Arizona State very well. They were up 17-3 at one point, and then they just kind of go on the tank. They have they have trouble in the red zone when they get down there, and they struggle there. And then they let Arizona State come back. Cam Skattebo was unbelievable in that game. He did just about everything you could want him to do. Caught a long pass, threw a touchdown pass, scored a 2-point conversion. He was the offensive MVP in a losing cause, which is pretty hard to do. But what happened in that game is that got to the end of it was that we saw the best of Quinn Ewers at the very end on a 4th and 13 in the overtime. He makes an audible, checks into something and throws a touchdown pass, which tied the game at that point. And then I never understand these things, David. So Gunnar Helm, they run him on a route that they said they hadn't used since last year on first down in the second overtime, and he throws it for a touchdown. It's like, if this is such a good route, why don't you run it more often?
Yeah, exactly. And again, and my question to you, and this will be, how many games this year, and when was the last one that Quentin Ewers was at his best from start to finish?
Probably Florida. I'm guessing they're thinking back on it. He was really good in that game. But,
that's what they're going to need. I mean, they can still win, but I mean, it's like you say, they're not a team that handles early prosperity well as far as really the pedal to the metal to keep the momentum going. They don't seem, and again, they're very good. I can see them beating Ohio State, but like you say, the way these first 2 games have played out in the postseason and really kind of some of their inconsistencies late in the year, I think it's fair that Ohio State is favored for sure.
Well, absolutely. They have some. Look, they've got 2 wide receivers that would be first-round draft picks. Because Jeremiah Smith is just a freshman. I'm assuming he's coming back. And then Emeka Egbuka, who is a guy that the Cowboys might even target in the first round of this draft. So they have just a ton of talent. They have Texas has a very good pass defense, and that's the one thing it has really going for it in this game. Although they were victimized in that Arizona State game as well, even though Arizona State doesn't have that kind of talent at wide receiver. They do have some talent at their quarterback position and at running back, but not at wide receiver. So this is going to be a serious upgrade, and Texas is going to have to really be at the top of its game. The knock on Quinn Ewers has been that, first of all, he was never very mobile, even when healthy. It appears that his right ankle injury might have abated enough that he could get around. He did score on a touchdown run against Arizona State. And that is going to be kind of paramount for them to win. Because if you're just relegated to being a pocket passer, it's just hard to win in football anymore, especially in college football. Everybody has a quarterback who can get loose a little bit. And that makes up for a lot of other problems, because you can account for a lot of things, but a quarterback who suddenly is out of the pocket and on the run, you just can't account for that kind of thing. And I think that has been an issue, and I'm sure that's the problem that most Texas fans have and why they want Arch Manning to be playing, because obviously he is a much greater threat as a runner than Quinn is. I do think that I thought that Arch Manning would play a bigger role in the game against Arizona State than he had been playing previously. And actually, looking back, and I don't think he got in the game at all. I did ask Arch Manning that question during the week leading up to it, when he has gotten into games late and then the later part of the season, if there was actually a true RPO factor involved, or if he was just supposed to run the ball. And he kind of smiled and said, yeah, there's a little bit of pass in there, but you'd have to ask Coach Sark about that. So I think, if you're not going to give him the option to throw it, then there's no point in putting him out there, because they know he's going to run.
Defenses are going to sit on that now for sure.
Yeah. So I do think that Texas has a good chance to win this game. It's just going to require Texas playing its best game, because look, their biggest problem is that they did a bad job filling out their bracket. They're on the wrong side of it. If they've been on the other side, Georgia going into that game against Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl clearly was not as effective offensively without Carson Beck at quarterback. Gunnar Stockton did a great job against Texas in the SEC title game in the second half, but that was a little bit of a guy coming in here you don't know anything about, and he was very gutsy performance, but he only threw for 76 yards in that second half. It wasn't like he dominated them from a physical standpoint. And, with a little bit of film and time to work on it, Notre Dame showed that they could shut him down. I think Notre Dame is a good team, but neither one of those teams is nearly as good as Ohio State. So I do think there's a good possibility that this game Saturday is for the national championship. One of these two teams, whoever comes out of this game winning, I think is going to win.
I would think so. Yeah. No, it should be. Really looking forward to it. Yeah, I mean, it's.
I hope so. I hope it's a good game, David. Although it's a late game, David, and as you and I both know, those games are never fun on deadline, because if it's a good game, then you can't write your story. If it's a bad game, well, the story's in the bag, and I get it. And as soon as it's over, I hit the button, and there we go.
Yeah, that's where I've tried not to be a jaded sports writer. But I understand, because when you're on deadline, sometimes you can't fully appreciate what a wonderfully competitive, wild game it is, because you're tearing up and writing something different with every possession, because it's going back and forth.
Yes, that is correct. Sometimes even on an afternoon game, you're doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was the case certainly in the Peach Bowl. All right, David, let's move along now and talk a little bit about the Mavericks, who are that they're kind of like the Cowboys this year. They're just dropping one player after another. First it was Luka Doncic, and now Kyrie Irving was out, and then Daniel Gafford missed the game last night.
He's going to miss some more time. It sounds like he has he's going to miss some time. So they'll be down 3 key guys here for a stretch.
Yes, and by a stretch, I'm assuming that the Doncic won't be back. He may miss the whole month, and then maybe even Irving could miss the rest.
A couple of weeks for Irving at least. So I think you're looking at least the next 4 to 5 games here without 3 of your top 5 guys, or 5, 7 guys, however you want to.
In this Irving situation, a bulging disc for a player in his early 30s, not a good thing.
Any back injury, like, any athlete, yeah.
That just feels like something that could just be a continuing problem here for the rest of the season, and who knows, for the rest of his career. Because I don't know that I realized that he'd had back problems before in his career. He did, and and again, it's because he didn't miss as many games last year as he had in recent years. And so sometimes when you get that season late in a player's career, you go, oh, okay, well, he's worked his way through that. They don't work their way through it later in their career. You may have a season where that is not an issue, but it's still there. And yeah, that's a concern that this is, they're saying a couple of weeks here, but it's also one where I think they will probably manage
Kyrie Irving differently now the remainder of the season to get ready for the postseason because you want him to be at his best there. And given on what they did last year, you're expecting a long run. So you're going to have to sacrifice some regular season games and minutes to get there. And now suddenly in a very competitive West, you look up and does that mean every series you're in is going to be on the road because of of what you were missing in the regular season to get your seeding? So it's this is a good enough team. It can win on the road. We saw them do it last year. They can do it again. But it does put a team in a more difficult position over the 6 to 8 weeks of the postseason.
Now, let me ask you this. The Mavericks under Nico Harrison have made big deadline moves the last couple of years, and they've worked out pretty well, obviously. Going into this season, it looked like they wouldn't have to do that kind of thing. They might make a move just to kind of shore up something in the rotation, but certainly nothing that would impact the starting five, and certainly the maybe the first couple of people off the bench. Because of these injuries, could you see them making a move of some kind just to keep themselves afloat?
Oh, I wouldn't. I think this season they finally got this team constructed the exact way they want around Luka, and with Kyrie there going forward. I think they feel that they have a good mix where they can get out and run and push the ball when Luka's not in there. When he's on the court, they can adapt to that. They have the size now to rebound. They have the defensive capability to switch more players on the perimeter. They have, when Luka is out, they have 2 to 3 other guys you can initiate the offense through. When you have a guy like Dinwiddie, who is arguably 10th or 11th, you have really good depth. I think this is the deepest team they've had. I think it's the team that best suits and complements what Luka Doncic does. I think you will see Nico Harrison take a different approach at this trade deadline than he has in recent years.
Yeah, I think so probably too. As a matter of fact, what you've seen in the speculation nationally is that they might move Maxi Kleber because he is kind of fallen in the rotation, just so they can have a little payroll flexibility to bring back a guy like Quentin Grimes, who has played very well in his role with the Mavericks this year since they acquired him. He's even kind of seen as the third ball handler now, moved ahead of Dinwiddie, which really is kind of hard to believe considering what Dinwiddie had been for that conference final run a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Which helps them all going forward. I mean, the more ways you can initiate the offense, the more guys you have that you can, put on ball. I mean, it's just, it's going to help them. I do think this stretch can help them once the postseason gets here, even though it's going to hurt their seeding. But there's also a fine line here. You don't want to go too long with guys playing beyond or outside of what their role is once everyone is in place, because you need to kind of hone that rotation and get it going. But they've shown they can adapt on the run the last couple of years. Jason Kidd has, with all these moves at the deadline, and still flourish. So I still think this is one of the top 3 teams in the league, and it's just about getting to the finish line with everyone healthy and back in their roles. And that's really the focus, I think, more so than what their seeding is going to be.
Yeah, I think so too. I really do see this, this team going forward. This might even work out in their favor a little bit. These guys getting this mid-season kind of time off.
I think it could, for sure.
They might be a little fresher going into the postseason than they have been in the past. So we'll see how it works out. They do certainly need to have about 20 to 30 games where they are all playing together, or at least 20 games, although they're playing together at the end of the season going into the playoffs and everyone being healthy. One last thing before we get out of here. What has been your take on Klay Thompson?
I'm not really – I don't read too much into what Klay Thompson does or doesn't give you in the regular season. I really think he was a guy who was brought in to make a difference in the postseason. So if he has a prolonged stretch where he's not hitting during the regular season, I'm not overly concerned with that. This is the weapon you brought in. And look, even when he's not at peak Klay Thompson, he's still enough of a threat where I don't know that any team's going to leave him, in the course of a playoff game. So he helps balance the floor for you that way and give you more space on offense. So I always viewed him as more it's what he gives you in the postseason. It's not necessarily what he gives you in the regular season.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We thank you for coming and listening. Be sure to come back, and we'll have more to talk about next week. We might even have Evan Grant back. I'm not sure. We may just kick him off the podcast altogether. I think that would be fair.
Can we put it up for a vote? Well, we can vote next week. If he's not back, let's vote.
I'm for a vote. I love a vote. All right, so from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.